And then, yep, agent Mansfield. Admit that, because that's the room camera.
You want me to keep on
Yeah, you can-
recording and we can just.
Perfect.
Oops, you should use that offer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, he would, I don't want to hear this be the bullshit.
There we are.
All right. Do we have anybody?
No, not as far as I know.
Okay.
Sandy will be able to see if they're in the room and with them.
What about Luann?
I know, I was wondering.
Luann hasn't dialed in.
There.
Vera. Vera should be also here.
She's probably in her office.
Oh, she might be right here.
Yeah. You want me to go check?
Go check. Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to go, Bill?
No, I can do it.
Okay.
I need the exercise.
I want us to be a co-host, so let me just listen to it.
Well, this is different from when we used to be. Long time ago.
Yeah, how's it?
The walls have been painted. There
Yeah.
used to be a bunch of books here. Is the
Yeah.
table the same? Or is this a new table?
It's a new-ish table, but
Chairs are new.
yeah.
Pillows, that's an innovation.
Is this
Oh,
pandemic
Sarah,
redecorated?
oh, boy,
Yeah.
can you?
There she
oh.
is. All right.
Yeah.
Bill just went, go look for you.
Bill went down to your office. He thought maybe you were there.
Everybody went looking for you.
Sorry.
Sarah, do you remember this?
Yes.
Yeah, we went quite a ways down the road on the subject and somehow we dropped it. But it was-
Didn't we have a session, a joint session?
Yeah. we talked about it.
And we decided not to do it because it encroached on a lot more territory of land.
I can't remember why we didn't. do
Yeah,
it.
that's why, because I think that's why,
Yeah,
because it, but I would love to look at it again.
yeah. Okay, I call to order. Luann's not gonna come. Let's see her.
And I can share this with you guys. Okay.
Okay, so I call to order the meeting of the PZC-Regulatory Review Committee on April 11th, 2022 at 2:03 p.m. Members present are Aquifer, Corsi, Pomecco, Word. Four of us, right? Okay. We have minutes from March 14th. We had our last, hopefully last virtual meeting.
I move that we accept them as written.
Okay. Ms. Van Ward,
I wasn't here,
you weren't there.
and I didn't watch them. Is there a video of this meeting to watch?
So wait, are we recording right now?
Good question.
We could record. You know, because it's a high, yeah,
Yes, we are recording.
Since it's
Okay,
hybrid, we
great.
should
Yeah.
record.
yes.
It's
And
been
it says,
recording or it's recording
We
now?
are recording. Yeah, it's blank.
right, okay.
Do you know if there's anyone?
Walking? There's no one walking right now. If someone watches in this room.
Sorry?
Do you need to start over?
No.
No, okay, okay,
No.
we've been on break, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I can second.
Okay.
So. We're both in favor of it. Okay, so, farm animals,
Farm animal.
Tell us about them.
my favorite topic.
So as you all know, roosters have been the source of many complaints in neighborhoods over the years. Kind of, and Paul, I'm sure can speak to this a little bit more than I can, but it happens in the spring, it doesn't happen for a while, it picks up again. And so, we've been thinking about changing our regulations regarding the keeping of animals and specifically roosters for a while. So we thought we'd just sort of start the discussion. And then we'll talk about when it'll be appropriate to sort of include this in the
Correction.
revision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you give us some history on why we haven't done this before?
Yeah, so with the roosters, I think that there's two issues going on with our regulations currently with the roosters. One is that we refer to the word poultry, right? In our regulations. We don't distinguish between male and female poultry. And we don't have, as far as I know, as the zoning enforcement agent, any complaints around the keeping of chickens, females.
Right.
We only have complaints around the keeping of roosters and specifically the noise. It has to do with noise. So that's one issue that we have, and we have never changed that. These regs were written before it was maybe in vogue to have roosters, right? Or Like
They've
chickens in
been
general.
around since like 2011.
Yeah. And the reason why we haven't, there isn't a reason why we haven't done it, except for we haven't gotten to it, I think. I think, there was a lot of movement. These regulations and trying to modify them, we've been doing this for a long, long time. And we've been wanting to reorganize the regulations for a long, long time. Vera and Paul have been sitting in this room and have rolled up your sleeves for a very long time. And I think then the pandemic happened and we kind of stopped altogether. And then we've been doing sort of little fixes. So this one never really rose to the level of like affordable housing and our multifamily housing.
We always
But
got
yet-
sidetracked.
Yeah,
And
however,
then it did.
it has been, Jolene spends a lot, we've always spent a lot of staff time on roosters. And so it's time to.
Does everyone have one of these? Or, yeah,
We distributed it. I don't know if we need copies.
Greenbelt.
No, Paul has reviewed our current chart with regard to the keeping of animals and made some suggestions.
Was that in a,
I had forwarded that out. Let me go make some copies of that.
yeah, I think it'd be
We're
helpful.
kind of in between a lot
I've got
of
mine.
different meetings. So we have the one issue, right? That is about the word around the term poultry. That's our one issue. Our other issue is that the way the table is written, we say, for example, 16 poultry per 40,000 acres, which is essentially just under an acre property. Some of our residents have interpreted that to mean, okay, well, if I have a half an acre, I can have 8 chickens or 8 roosters, right? So we have an interpretation issue on the amount allowed per square foot. And then we also have the issue of acreage. And I think some of Paul's suggestions in this table have addressed both of those issues.
And one of the key things to remember is that they start crowing at 12 weeks.
Okay,
So-
I didn't know that.
So roosters below 12 weeks are fine. It's when we get to 12 weeks that
Yeah.
That things change.
And it in some of our neighborhoods and some of our smaller lot neighborhoods, it can cause quite a neighborhood disturbance and make some of our residents very unhappy.
When
How
people
long
get
does the
chicks, do they know if they're male or female?
So the other important thing about 12 weeks is that it's obvious which are the males. That you
Right,
have.
but when
It's-
people-
It's hard, they old very hard,
Right, and when people buy little chicks, like, how old are those?
a day old.
How long
No, I
can a
mean, the ones
rooster
that people
live?
buy.
They're often bought very young, a
Okay.
day or two old.
Oh, yeah, I didn't
And
realize
then,
that.
you may buy females, but one turns out to be male. 'cause
Right,
They're
so you
so
don't-
hard to,
Exactly, so you don't know when you're buying them.
Yeah.
so then, but at 12 weeks, it's obvious.
How long do they live? What's the life?
They could live 5 or 6 years, but that would be unusual.
So now we'll have to have a rooster sanctuary.
Your
Right.
grandfather in a certain amount.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
I have an idea about grandfather.
so, yeah, so I'm not, typically our regulations are if it existed prior to the change, it's grandfathered. Right? And that will be very hard for me as a zoning enforcement officer to
He's a very
enforce.
old group.
Yeah, right, right.
Well, it'll be easier after several years have gone by.
Right, but in the, if and when we do change the regulation, that will be a difficult part of the enforcement process.
But I think you do have to grandfather an existing rooster.
And I mean, the ones I have complaints about, I certainly know about, right? And those I know are existing, but there are a lot that I am not aware of.
So let me go through my chicken part here. Well, one part is that less than 40,000 zero, and I think that was the original intention of our rule. So, you don't have a large beef animal on less than 40,000 square. That was our original intention. So less than 40,000, nothing. Over 40,000, I've got basically the same things for large animals, swine, medium animals. When we get to chickens, I'm saying less than 20,000 square feet, 0, 20,000 to 40,000, 6. Now I got that 6 from, there's actually several towns in Connecticut that prohibit roosters, but allow 6 between 20,000 and 40,000,
Yeah.
including New Haven.
That's what I found too.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think that's reasonable. And
Imagine the New Haven.
if it's a chicken hen less than 12 weeks of age, that doesn't bother anyone.
Yeah.
And then more than 40,000, 16. So we go back to the number we had originally. And that's chicken hens more than 12 weeks of age. And all other poultry are excluded unless you've got 5 acres.
That
I
seems
like that.
reasonable.
I like that.
So we don't have to discuss ducks and geese that make noise from day one.
Right.
And guinea hens,
Guinea
right?
hens.
Guinea hens, yeah.
If you want to have those, buy 5 acres.
So
It's
what
not that
about the
expensive.
dwarf goats?
Dwarf goats,
You didn't put them in?
Well, because this, so right now, we talked, we really brought this to you to talk about chickens, but we do have some folks that want dwarf goats on an egg.
Dwarf donkeys was the most recent request of,
Okay.
a
Well, could that-
miniature donkey.
Could that be a medium animal?
You know.
We don't know,
The-
what does a definition of a medium man?
The,
Well, it says similar sized animal.
my interpretation of a miniature donkey is that it's a donkey.
Okay. That's reasonable.
It makes the noise of a donkey.
Oh, yeah.
It needs room like a donkey, and how you treat it is regardless,
What do we
right?
do with horses? We say
It's a large
less than
animal.
40,000.
One animal per 40,000. I suppose we could.
Having 1 acre to keep a horse on is not enough space.
It
as
is not,
is.
actually.
So
Yeah,
So maybe we should increase that.
So this is where Michael is gonna soon be full, he is staffing the agriculture committee right now. And I used to staff them. So I think we want them to look at this, and that we want them to provide
Yeah,
us
let's
with
ask them,
feedback, but
because maybe it's 80,000 for a horse.
Or a dairy
And
cow.
often where there's
Doesn't
one
feel like
horse,
an
they
acre
would
would be
like
enough for
two.
either of those.
well, I don't know. I think it's really depends on where that acre is, right?
True.
I mean,
True.
If that acre is in in Pleasant Valley, you know, adjacent to,
A lot of open space.
and adjacent to a 100-acre property, and
Right.
I don't know how big a horse like corral has to be, not an acre.
Well,
But
and
you
the
need to have-
way,
Well, you usually have to have some pasturing.
the way the regs sort of naturally control that is that we have 100-foot buffer for a barn or a stable.
Oh,
So that's
an acre
how,
property, you're not gonna have.
so that's how the regs sort of control that issue. It works on some properties, it doesn't work on others, it depends on the shape, right? If
And
it's
do you
a-
want to talk about what happened at
Yeah.
ZBA in December?
Yeah,
That-
so we had a property on Fern Road. It was several acres. It was triangular, very long and thin. And they could not, they had the acreage to have a horse. They absolutely did. But they could not meet the 100-foot setback. So they applied for variance. You know, look at the ZBA, looked very careful at the land, the topography, the neighboring properties, the houses in proximity, and the ZBA felt it was appropriate for them to be able to have this barn in the center of their property, as you know, positioned in a way where it wasn't going to bother the neighbors because they couldn't meet the
Not so much the
100-foot.
barn, but it's the manure pits and.
Right.
all that.
Yeah. So, but we do have that 100-foot setback that, you know, sort of helps.
Well, let's
A little
consult
bit.
the agriculture committee on
Okay.
this, yeah.
And the other factor would be what the area is zoned for, so it's not gonna just be anywhere.
Right.
Well,
For
all right.
residential, yeah.
And residential, is that all we're talking about at this point?
Well, this is a subcategory, so there's the ones that are more than 5 acres, and then this is the ones that are less than 5 acres.
Right, so in 5 acres, we say we're out, right? So 5 acres, we don't impose any limits on the number of animals that you can have.
But if it's,
Well, other than the limits the state would put on,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
best practice,
Yeah,
Best
yeah,
practice,
yeah,
best
yeah.
practice.
and everyone follows best practices.
Yeah, and I consult, I
Practice.
consult very often with animal control on these things to see what they think is appropriate area. Like if there's a question about, you know, it talks about combinations as determined by the zoning agent. And that's something that I always consult with animal control on, whether or not they believe that the animals are being cared for in the, you know, the best way possible.
Do we have setbacks for poultry?
So we do not. So, yeah, this gets, so a coop, right? We consider a structure, and under 200 square feet, we do not require a permit for structures under 200 square feet.
Is there a side yard setback for that?
It would be 10 feet
Okay.
for a structure of that size. I did, like Tallinn talks about fencing and they, you know, fenced in areas intended to keep livestock confined to a small area such as holding pens and dry lots shall be located a minimum distance of 75 feet from any front, side, or rear parking property line. You know, we could go crazy with these different setbacks for the different animals and the different types of pens. And we've been through this, right? Pen versus pasture.
Right.
yeah,
That we've
remember
been
that
through
one,
that one. Yeah, so, you know, maybe we talk to ag about the setback requirements as well and see if they have any suggestions.
But there are no fencing requirements for chickens, are there? Does anybody complain about chickens wandering over? I know one of my neighbors is. Complains about it.
I worry about the ones on Spring Hill Road that wander into.
Yeah, you can see them, wandering around. Probably some of them don't survive.
So this is Glastonbury, all areas, buildings and structures for the keeping, housing and pasturing of livestock or poultry shall be located a minimum distance of 125 feet from any street line 40 feet from any side or rear property line. In addition, 100 feet from any dwelling located on an adjacent property. So they're imposing that for poultry.
Yeah, the lucky thing would be that the chicken doesn't survive. Some of our younger drivers might actually swerve because of it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that might be an issue that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I did read a little bit about roaming chickens and keeping them on your property. I mean, I don't know how,
Is it a problem? I know people. complain, but
I
is it
have
really a
not, I have
problem?
never had a
I've had it
complaint.
Down on Eagle Court.
Well, somebody shot their neighbor's chicken.
Oh.
Yeah,
275.
yeah.
Towards.
There's no way to zone away
Okay.
human.
Oh, no, no,
behavior.
no.
Yeah, that was my prior life, not in this department, but, yeah, so in my tenure as zoning enforcement officer, I have never had a complaint with regard to hens.
Don't think we need to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's never mind that.
Do we require zoning permits for when you start keeping more animals? Say you've got one structure, so you need a zoning permit for structure, right?
If it's over 200 square feet, and Paul, you can weigh in on this, but a 200 square foot
That's
coop is
huge,
pretty
yeah.
big.
That's a big coop, yeah. So
Yeah.
these 16 would, you need
Yeah, it's not
50
big
square
enough.
feet, yeah.
So we're not requiring a zoning permit for accessory structures.
Not under 200
Under
square feet.
200,
So
so-
several years ago, we changed the regulations to align with the building code. It was getting a little confusing because the building department, a shed under 200 square feet was not requiring a building permit, but then they were requiring a zoning permit. So we did make that change.
Does anyone have any comments about rabbits? I'm not a rabbit expert.
You're quiet.
They're quiet. I was thinking of some of those lots that are,
Caged.
yeah, I was thinking about those lots that are, we don't have many lots below 20,000, so this would basically allow everyone to have a rabbit.
Have 12 of them.
Circle darts
I
about
think,
20.
yeah.
I raised them as a kid.
Now, I had, growing up in Mansfield, I had guinea hens as a kid that bothered the neighbors.
I never complained about my rabbits
When
that I
we
know of.
established the
Maybe
zoning
that's why
regulations.
maybe that's why it was in there, yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
And they were free roaming.
So what I'm hearing is that under 5 acres, this group is recommending no roosters.
I'd go for that for
Yes.
sure.
And I think the devil is always in the details, right? So I think I think what I'd like to do is do we want to keep this to roosters or do we want to fix the rest of this table? Because this table can be problematic. Sometimes we're wondering if we go out there and if you have one donkey, 16 chickens. I remember going out to Olson Drive. I don't know if
And a
you were there,
partridge in a
a partridge and a pear tree, and Linda and I were trying to do the calculus, and it was like, if you have this, then so that's sometimes what happens
Right.
with this table.
Might as well fix the whole thing. while
I
you're
mean,
at
if
it.
they're gonna,
Right, but it's just how.
Right.
Well, I
Well, at
think
least the suggestions that have already
what we
been
want to
made.
be clear is that these numbers, there's no assigning a percentage based on your lot area. Meaning if you've got, for instance, 10,000 square feet, or if you're less, we want our residents to be clear that doesn't mean you get a percentage of what
Right,
we're.
that's because we
Yeah.
got the less than.
Yeah, so Paul's done a good job with the less than 20,000 zero. So I think that takes care of that interpretation issue.
Can
Well,
you have one large animal and a medium animal?
well,
Yeah, so-
that's the partridge and a pear tree.
Right.
thing.
Yeah, so that's where I use our animal control officer to really advise me as to whether or not there's enough land to support the animals that are living on it.
but you don't have a rule to follow.
I don't, it
So-
says
so can you-
combination.
Can you make a decision on that without having it be a regulation? I mean.
As
is it
determined,
problematic?
yeah, as determined, I have not had a problem with that. No, as determined by the zoning agent.
Yeah, I think we can just let the zoning agent decide.
Yeah,
I have one question as I've staffed the agriculture committee, that less than 20,000 square feet, we can't have any chickens. Like, why do we, some people like in Brooklyn and are having chickens, right? Like really small.
But we don't
lots.
have any lots less than 20,000 square feet.
No legal.
Oh, we might have in the future.
If
Right.
you have your way.
If I have.
So,
my way.
okay, so we're saying that like, if you live on Circle Drive, you can have 6 chickens. Like if we're gonna confirm the lot size, but
I think if we get my 5,000 square foot lot that I've been pushing for, we don't want any chickens on that. Yeah.
okay, so that sounds,
You know, when eggs went up to like $8 a dozen, there was a company on TV that was showing commercials where they would drop a coop and a couple of chickens in your backyard and actually rent your chickens.
yeah.
Yeah.
yep. So I think, next steps is we'll talk to the ag committee.
Okay.
And we'll run this by
Put this
them.
on their agenda for their May meeting.
And so one of the questions in order to complete this table is combinations, right? Of large animals, small animals.
I think we've decided that we're gonna let
Oh, as
me,
determined,
yeah,
other animals,
yeah,
other animals in addition to what the singular list is that right? Or other animals that aren't on this list?
Combinations consistent with this chart are permitted as determined by the
Oh,
zoning
I didn't
agent.
see that
So,
line. Thank you.
so,
That
yeah.
does it. Okay.
thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Good, okay.
You would
Let's
even
move
talk
on.
about dwarf animals, which are very popular.
Yeah, right.
Let's move on to riparian corridor zoning.
So,
Corridor zoning.
so it sounds like, we, I know you have the map, but Michael, why don't you kind of give us a high level overview of
Love this one.
what you've done?
Sure, so I just have real quick. I just have a quick PowerPoint where I can just throw these maps up on the screen, and you know what I'm realizing? This tiny little computer does not have an HDMI, but I think I have no, it's fine. I'm just gonna send it to my own email. So if we'll just give it a second here. Oops. So anyway, Conservation Commission asked me to start looking into this. I'll pull this up in just a second.
Or restart, they want they're not satisfied. I don't think they fully understood what we have that is protecting our riparian corridors existing
Absolutely.
and what,
Yeah, we already have the 100-year flood zone.
right,
Yep.
so I think we wanted to
So-
articulate that, and we wanted to run this by this committee before Michael went to the full Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
But this is gonna be really helpful because you're gonna give him some other feedback based on what was done back in, when was that, 2000?
So this one is November 18th, 2020. And the original map was same date.
So- I started based on, so there was a report that the Western Connecticut Council of Governments put out in mid-2021, which kind of detailed the state of riparian corridor protections across Connecticut. And this came forward at the Conservation Commission meeting, and I think there was a feeling from several people that we're not doing enough to protect our riparian areas. But as people who administer the zoning regulations, you know that these are extremely long and dense documents. We do have a lot of provisions in there, but they haven't really been pulled out by category type for what does this mean on an average day. So, Paul, you already started by talking about the flood zone, and I think that's where we start. So we have the flood hazard zone in town. runs over many of our water bodies. As far as I can tell, it's contiguous with the FEMA flood maps. And so,
We can send one of these down to the other end.
so on this map, the flood zones are shown in that red crosshatch. On the map on the screen, they're shown in dark blue. You can see the water courses there in a light blue. Our flood hazard zone is extremely strict on what you can build in it. So the only things that you are allowed to do in a flood hazard zone are listed here. So you can do your agricultural and horticultural uses, but you can't do cage poultry, you can't do cage livestock, you can't do anything intensive, you can't produce fertilizers, you can't strip forest or minerals.
Can't put
So-
a septic system there.
No, you can't, you can't do much in a flood zone just at the federal level. If you would do anything that would raise the mean flood elevation at all, you have to get what's called a letter of map adjustment, which requires you to go to the federal government and prove you're not doing that, and then wait 6 to 9 months, and then prove that you're not going to do anything to invasive species. It's a whole thing to get your letter of map adjustment done.
Letter of map amendment.
Letter map amendment, yes. And they've changed the name. It's no longer Loma, it's now Lomer, but it's fine. You can, so that's at the federal level, you can do very little, period. But we've gone beyond that and said, you're basically not allowed to build buildings at all in the flood zone. You can do open space uses, you can have parking areas, you can have an accessory building or a swimming pool. You can have a sand or gravel operation, but again, only if you would not change mean flood elevation. You would not cause an increase in mean flood elevation. So you can extract from a flood zone. And in doing so, you would be able to potentially decrease mean flood elevation, which the federal government is generally happy about, but you still have to get through wetlands where applicable and planning a zone, and it's a special permit. You can do a hydropower facility. I don't think that's particularly likely around here at this point.
We did have one person who thought about it.
At the
Well, they
dam,
did
right?
do one.
Yeah,
Did they
at
do
the
one?
Minnesota Dam, right?
Yeah, down,
Okay, I'm thinking about that.
and that's probably why it's
Um,
allowed.
Yeah.
I'm
'cause I
thinking
think
about the
that
one
was a big.
on Moulton Road,
Oh, they
very small one.
did
They didn't do it.
no, they did it.
They did it,
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
Good. We don't want to.
I mean,
discourage
they did
that.
it. I wouldn't call it a hydro facility, it was more of a,
Um,
like a water
Hobby.
wheel.
Hydropower is allowed, but all of these things, this is it. No new houses, no new anything. And for, you know, when it comes to restricting uses, it's very hard to get a use variance. Variances in space, relatively easy compared to a use variance, and they're not easy at all. So we have narrow, low intensity uses, which we allow in this area. Now, it doesn't say you can't cut down a tree that's going to fall down on your house or do reasonable maintenance of your existing recreational property. But already around the flood zone, we have pretty strong protections. It's important to note that while the flood zone, which covers the Fenton, Mount Hope, and Willimantic rivers, is pretty densely protected, we have plenty of other watercourses in town that are not. The two big ones, which I call out later, I'll just scroll down to that. I've highlighted here in red, just as these are the largest contiguous watercourses that occur entirely in our town that are not protected by the flood hazard zone. We'll come back to those in a second. There are some other protections that we have that aren't particularly relevant to riparian corridor zoning. Aquifer protection is something that people have said to me. They want to know more about our aquifer protection areas and how does that relate to riparian protection. It doesn't really, it is superficially related in that they are often around rivers, as that is where the water is. But as you can see, the aquifer protection areas extend significantly out from the Fenton and Willimantic rivers and cover a lot of area where there isn't actually watercourse.
And also it's the one around the Fenton is basically all on Yukon property, basically.
So the aquifer protection regs are
Yukon.
important, but the aquifer protection regs are not really the protections that we use for rivers. What we do have we have our performance standards. So aquifer protections are fall under our various performance standards, but these are the things that we demand from everyone at any time. Performance standards are long. I tried to condense them down into one paragraph each. Our site development standards do a couple of things. So minimal removal vegetation, minimal required grading, minimal disturbance for duration. So you're not supposed to have a site open for a particularly long amount of time. You're not supposed to strip vegetation before you have your zoning permit. So you're not supposed to start stripping. You're not supposed to create or disturb slopes that are greater than 3:1, which is good. That prevents erosion from happening, particularly on steep slopes. And also explicitly called out in our site development standards, and of importance for this discussion, is the idea that there are supposed to be, wherever feasible, buffers of undisturbed natural vegetation of 50 feet or more along all watercourses and wetlands.
So we already have a riparian.
We already secretly have
However,
but
however,
this exists at the discretion of the commission. So the site development standards will be something that is supposed to be considered by planning and zoning
Right.
when an application comes
That's something
before
to
you.
consider, not something that's we're obliged to do.
Right. It is something staff will comment on. I'm sure engineering and everyone in planning would note that we want to have this, and if there isn't, we would raise concerns, but technically there's nothing that says thou shalt, right? But we've already called it out as something that we want. Wherever
Yeah.
feasible, we want at least 50 feet
Yeah.
protection. I've also noted what our actual erosion control standards are.
Can we just back up
Sure,
one thing,
sure,
Michael?
sure.
so you've got this buffers of undisturbed natural vegetation at 50 feet or more, right? You still have a lot of work that's happening within 50 feet of a wetland, because in wetlands, you have your upland review area. So if you look at what's happening, many times where there is work that's going right up to a wetland, because the applicant has proven that there will be no significant negative impact on wetlands or watercourses. So you're allowing that, even though, so you're allowing that under inland wetlands, but the Planning and Zoning Commission is saying, but we prefer that you keep this undisturbed.
But you come to wetlands first to talk about
Exactly.
wetlands disturbance.
Yes.
But wetlands is different from riparian.
Right, because, and this is something I have in the presentation, which I finally actually sent to myself, is riparian corridor zoning is just a catchy term, right? It originates, I think the drive in Connecticut really comes from the fact that Massachusetts has these really strong protections that are enforced at the state level, where you have a 200-foot non-encroachment buffer around all water courses.
According to Charlie Vidic, every New England state except Connecticut.
No. So
Okay.
every New England state
Yeah.
except Connecticut has some type of
Oh,
riparian statewide protection.
okay.
So it is not 200 feet in all 5 of the other New England states. It is that in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is notable because they did it first in 1996.
Yeah.
And they have very strong protections, but they also have various exemptions to it.
Mhm.
If you are in a historically densely developed urban area, that 200-foot goes down to 25 feet. Right? So it's not
So
that
it's not really.
it's real insofar as in rural areas, it is real, but it would have destroyed the city of Worcester to have suddenly not had any of that space because of all the old mill towns.
Have you been to the Cape? Have you been to the Cape? Right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so how much of that area is right? And do you see big DEP permit signs everywhere where there's development? Yeah, so there are ways of getting
Right.
around it. I'm not sure how, but
They basically have the same no significant impact standards we do.
yeah.
But if there would be a significant impact, it's denied. So just kind of flat out, they deny things that would be significant impact within wetlands areas by state statute. But if it's not, you can do it. You can do it. And where it is changes exactly how far you have to be. But Connecticut's paradigm for river protections is just much weaker, because as opposed to the paradigm being if significant impact, no, ours is if significant impact, call a public hearing and then you can approve it anyways, right? even our environmental intervener paradigm says if they prove that there would be some impact, all they also have to prove is that this is the most feasible and prudent financial thing, and you can't do it better on the site, and you would still be justified in approving it. And I am not an attorney, but you could go to a court, and there have been cases about that. So Connecticut protection paradigm is weaker, but zoning is very strong, which is why if you go through zoning and say, because of various reasons elucidated in our POCD and other statewide standards, we find this to be important, you can block right there. And we've already kind of done that with our flood hazard protection and this 50-foot area.
Have we covered our butts sufficiently with our current regulations to adapt to the Long Island Sound thing that came along last year?
Which Long Island Sound thing that came along last year?
Apparently, all the waters of Connecticut go into Long Island Sound.
They do.
And so there's a new regulation that if you don't treat them properly, you can be sued.
I'm gonna just write down to look into that.
It was October of last year.
Do you have to have the public act number?
No.
Yeah,
It's been-
I'll find it.
but
It's been talked about a lot.
It's been,
Yeah.
People who don't want things to happen in certain places, bring it up.
Right.
We
I
do
mean-
need to cover our butt on that.
We have all these rules and regulations, but do we think of the aggregate effect all
Right.
this building is for us
Right.
going on right around all the river?
So that's a great question. So I'm pulling up the actual presentation I made for this. I'm gonna try to not take all of your time. But we just jump in here real quick. Well, I stole most of this from the West Cog report, but there's stuff that is mine, right? So from the top of Gillette Castle,
Nice picture.
thank you. I stole it from the internet. From the top of Gillette Castle, you can see a really beautiful part of the Connecticut River, but you can also see that there are disturbances along the water line. When we come out to what the actual developed percentages were back in 2006, most of the state that is not in the what I call Ashford corridor and the Northwest Hills are at least 11% developed. And 11% is one of those critical numbers that is cited in a lot of the literature on this as being above 11% of a riparian corridor being developed starts to cause degradation in your water quality. Now, how bad that is debatable, but when it comes to the actual phosphorus yield, which I think is phosphorus and nitrogen are a lot of the things that the state's really concerned about with this, it's really bad along the Connecticut River. It's somewhat bad along the Thames, though you'll note around us, it's okay. Very bad along the water line. Last year, the state released, or in 2021, the state put together a whole bunch of critical areas where it noted we need to either be focusing on restoring or protecting in order to kind of save our water quality. And it just so happens that we fall into one of those critical areas, Natchog Mount Hope watershed. So the Willimantic River, the western part of town is not, but the eastern part of town or eastern watershed are all in one of these critical protection areas, of which there are only 4 in the state. When it comes to how far out you need to protect, there's science on this that I didn't really have a chance to do a dive into. There's been a lot of papers. This is from a 95 paper. My former advisor would be yelling at me for using old data like this. But there has been some evidence that you see a really impressive uptick in how much nitrogen and phosphorus you're filtering out. Once you hit about 60 feet wide, it just gets better
So
from
is that
there.
60 total or 60 each side?
So this is 60 each side.
Each side.
So 60
that's
feet
100
from,
This
so
would be 120 on.
yes, as opposed to 25 feet on each side of the water, going out to 60 feet on each side. Really cuts down on nitrogen and phosphorus. There's been a whole bunch of subsequent studies about how far out you actually have to go to preserve these critical wetlands values. You know, these are our wetlands. I showed you this already, our flood.
Those are water courses.
Our water courses, rather. I didn't show our wetlands because that's a mess of a map. It's just orange brush strokes all over like a Jackson Pollock painting. So we talked about our floodplain protections. I showed you those which are critically unprotected. One thing about floodplains that I really note is the massive difference in how far they are. This is one stretch of the Fenton within a half mile. we have wetlands that extend, we have a floodplain that extends about 60 feet from one side, and it also extends up to 1,000 feet, because it's not about the river, it's about the floodplain and the contours of the land.
And that, yeah, that could be topography,
Right,
right?
Yeah,
it's a
If it
topography.
goes downhill, it's going
based on-
further. Yeah.
Based on topography.
Yeah.
Because
Completely.
the floodplain zone does a great job of incidentally protecting the river, but isn't actually about river protection. The other really important map, that is the other overlay that we have on these two maps on the table, is our permanently protected land. So just to quickly, no, I wanted that to go over there. To quickly run over what you're seeing, these are what the colors mean over here. We have a lot of critically protected land, a bunch of which is actually around those rivers that didn't seem protected by our floodplain area. If it's crosshatched, it's permanent. If it's a green, darker light, it's us, the town. Blue is the state, yellow is the university, orange is the Fed, pink and purple are Joshua's trust. So we have a bunch of protected land, permanently protected. Mansfield is one of the best towns in the state for permanently protected, permanently set aside land, which is a very positive thing. So we have these, which do a good job of preserving water courses. But if it's not crosshatched, hypothetically, it could be taken back out.
So one thing just to note that the yellow is not permanently protected. It's
No,
Yukon.
look at all
None
the
of
cons.
But however, we have
Except-
no
What's the
jurisdiction.
what's that one up there? Where is
That
that?
one.
That one is Yukon, the Heap property, where it was part of their environmental impact evaluation when they took agricultural land, they had to put that property into a conservation restriction. So that comes out from
Lodge Road.
Discovery Drive out to Hunting Lodge Road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they called it, it's over the landfill, and they call it the Hillside Environmental Education Park.
That's
And
cool.
it is
That's
actually-
fine,
It's
everything.
beautiful.
It's really
yeah.
beautiful. You can go, there's wonderful birding back there. There's a lot of nice little boardwalks around some of their wetlands area.
How do you access that? Discovery Drive?
You
Hunting
can go
Lodge
from
Road.
Discovery Drive
Lot.
or Hunting Lodge Road.
Walk around the back. Yeah, so
You actually can walk from Shelter Falls right up
Yeah,
to there, and then
yeah.
it just goes across the road. There's a parking area right there, and then you can walk it further.
really beautiful continuous
You
area.
Go right up
That
to
was
the
fun.
innovation building.
And if you cut off to the left, you can go into the trailer park.
Yeah.
It's good.
So there's actually, we have a large amount of protected land, some of which also incidentally protects the river. So just some of the recommendations, I think, is as you have here, riparian corridor mapping, anything you do, the best tool you have is a zoning overlay district. We kind of have one with the floodplain. It's not really an overlay district, at least as far as I can tell, but a zoning overlay district of a certain width around noted riparian corridors is a good tool. They're pretty strong legally. Again, not an attorney, but I do play a zoning agent on TV.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where is the line that this gets so strong that it becomes a taking?
So
Where is that line?
again, I am not an attorney, and we can talk to our attorney on Thursday.
It's the significant impact line.
Yeah.
It's significant impact. There's no one who will be able to necessarily say, you've denied me any use of my land. If you deny someone any use of their land, it's a take, right? So if you say no, and somebody happens to have a property that's only in the stream, yeah, that could be considered a taking. But zoning of itself isn't, right? It's denying somebody any reasonable use of their land that would be considered that. Now, of course, such a claim would immediately go to court because the town would have defenses like, you were already in a critical wetlands habitat, that if you weren't going to be able to build a house there anyway, we weren't going to let you do that already, and we're
Right,
not
and
going to not let you do
But there's
agriculture
so
here.
many different.
Right.
There's so many different ways of,
layers.
yes, for example, they could, and we probably could find some use. They might be able to go and, just because you can't build a house, doesn't mean you have a taking.
Similar to the floodplain protections that we have now. I mean, you can put up an accessory structure. You could potentially put up a swimming pool. You could potentially put up, you could do agriculture here, right? Those are reasonable things to do in proximity to a river, as long as you don't obliterate the tree cover and strip out the hillside and make a 90-foot retaining wall.
So what's the downside of making a 50-foot buffer besides the taking?
Other than the taking, the downsides, as far as I see them, there's two. So first, you will have critics who will say that you did not go far enough. If you're going to bother doing it, so if we scroll back up, right? So if we scroll back up, if you're going to make a 50-foot wide buffer, you're going to get a significant decrease in sediment and nitrogen and phosphorus. But if you're only going 50 feet wide, are you really hitting those critical margins for wildlife habitat or flood mitigation or sediment removal or nitrogen control? And the answer is maybe. The literature is not conducive on it. And I did not have time to do a full literature search.
I'm thinking that 50 feet, if we can keep septic systems 50 feet away from rivers,
it's a huge win.
that's a.
Well,
huge-
they already are. The
they already
50
are?
feet they're not from the wetlands, they're 50 feet from a water course. That's
We already have that.
except for in very unusual circumstances, like a septic repair where, like they can't get it in anywhere.
And how about you can build a house closer than 50 feet now? To a,
If you can prove that you're,
I know one
there's
house
no-
that's 2 feet away from a house.
Yep.
But
if you're, if there's no significant negative impact to wetlands, you could get a wetlands license. What we're talking about right now, then we go into zoning and it might be like you can fit it from wetlands, but you may not meet the setbacks. But then my question would be where is the setback? Where is that center line of a river that moves?
So
is
this
it the
is
center line or is it from the end of the floodplain?
so that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So one of the states that addresses this the best is Vermont. So Vermont basically gave up on defining where the edge of rivers are because it's kind of folly from a scientific standpoint, and said, well, this is the river plain, and the river plain is protected. So it can shift in its course, and they wanted to try to restore it to natural
How is
courses.
the river plain defined?
I started looking at that report, it was about 800 pages. So I didn't have the chance to.
You're gonna be the one
Absolutely.
going out there, you
Right.
guys, and
Um,
figuring this out, so
You never
you have
know.
to make it clear.
It's one of those things.
The 100-year floodplain?
Well, we could do the 100-year floodplain, but that is all consistently overlapping with the flood zone. So there are water courses which are in that critical area, right, that are not in the floodplain. If it was just the floodplain, we could make this easy, right? If it was just in the floodplain, we could make it
Like an elevation.
right? We can make it elevation.
You have elevations.
But there are streams. So just coming over here, this is the delineated edge. So it's 4 of these sub-regional basins that are involved in the Natchog Mount Hope watershed. It's this area that is noted by the state for critical for protection. So that's another thing you could do rather than saying it's in the whole town, not put the
I see.
protection over the Willimantic River
Because it already has.
watershed, but saying that, but getting the extra strength of we are doing this because not only is it consistent with our POCD, but the state itself has noted that this is a critical area to
So that would
preserve.
be between the Fenton and the Mount Hope.
So it's the Fenton and Mount Hope watersheds.
And that's what you're saying, a floating zone.
You could do a floating zone
Still
over
have the
that.
schoolhouse.
overlay.
An overlay.
We
Over
still
that.
have the schoolhouse one that
Yep.
would be left out of that.
No, that's in.
It's in?
Yep, it's just in.
So can you, because what we should probably do is do that critical area that
Mhm.
we're talking about, and then our preserved open space on top of that, because there's really not all that many properties that are,
Yeah.
Now, you're grandfathered if you already have
yeah.
a house.
But you couldn't do more.
You couldn't do more.
It's
Can we move septic systems back that are non-conforming?
What do you mean?
Remember when we had a problem in the
Bicentennial Pond,
Bicentennial Pond?
way back when,
And we started looking where the problem was. It was always septic systems that were too
Yeah.
close to the river. And some of those were fixed and the water got better.
yeah,
Is that something we can do?
who's we though?
Well,
Can we
how did we
demand it?
fix the Bicentennial Pond thing? Did we just encourage people to?
Well, I
Or
think
did-
probably when they had a failing septic system, the public health code said you need
Yeah.
to fix them.
But we really drilled down on that area to clean it up. So maybe we
And I
just
think
expected
that was Eastern Highlands, that was the we there.
Okay. So Eastern Highlands did a more thorough inspection than we normally would do.
We'll just go over here to look at the overlay together. We go Mansfield GIS. Pull this up. And what you can see is I'll just turn on our open space. Just our water courses. And then we need a region. This is for you, Jen. This was for people asking. Okay, let's see what happens.
Soils? Or-
Yeah.
Hmm,
It's drainage soil. profile.
no, I don't think.
I'm gonna find it. Let me just click around.
So here-
Watershed. There we go.
But
That's the thing. Local basins. You can see those.
Oh, that's cool.
I love this. This is really good GIS. This is very, very good GIS.
there we
right?
go.
So these areas here, and I'm going to put on a different base map that's going to pop this better. We're going to put on the dark mode base map. Put on the dark gray canvas. So you can see here all of the colors this side of this line. And it's hard to see because the lines are messy, which is why I put that bright yellow line over the other one. But
So we've
you
got
can
northeastern Mansfield, we've got quite a bit of,
What are you looking at?
so zooming in here, right? So these are the water courses that are not protected. Oh, and I'm frozen. Water courses that are not protected otherwise by. There we go. If I just turn on zoning real quick.
They're not
This-
protected by a riparian.
Riparian corridor. So
But
some of
by-
these
Or
are
by
protected by,
open
Flood
space.
hazard.
They're not
So
even
these are protected by-
the 100-year flood.
these are protected by 100 flood hazard, but none of this is, none of this is, none of this is, none of this is, not this pond, not Hanson's Pond, not this feeder stream. Parts of Schoolhouse Brook are, but not all of it.
Mhm.
So nothing that's flowing through here is. Part of Yukon streams are, but not all of them.
So one thing we could do is we could add protection to streams that do not have it now.
Yes. You could add protection to streams that do not have it now. You could codify the functional protections that you have already aspirational and saying you should maintain a 50-foot buffer from this. And we could turn that from a you should to you will.
Mhm.
It is not a may.
Now,
And,
why
yes.
not do that for the entire town?
There's no reason you couldn't. I just think that we have a state report that says that half a town in particular
Right.
has extra added reason. So if you have people pushing back, it's easier to also be able to say, well, it's not just us saying
Right,
this, the
right.
state also said it.
Right.
And every time you can break out someone who isn't you, you get to deflect the political, you're an advocate who's trying to do bad for me and my property, which is always a pushback.
You just mentioned something that I'm curious. Where's Hanson's Pond? You just
That
said.
It's right there, yeah, that, yeah,
Off
So,
Ward Hill Road, right?
yeah.
this big body of water here.
And that, I believe, is I think we need to check the deeds on that. I think it is actually just become a good chunk of that is.
Did that dairy farm close that was on that road?
Oh, God, then we'll
You mean, John
get
Wells?
rid of the parcel lines. and the
It's
block
just like a half mile out.
Yeah, I don't know. He's still doing
Still?
stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's.
He doesn't own much land.
So there are plenty of water courses that are not protected. There are a bunch that are, particularly our big water courses.
Is there a Mr.
Are.
Hanson? Is that why it's labeled Hanson's Pond?
Probably at some
I'm not
point.
sure. I
In
don't-
here somewhere, I remember reading Hanson's Pond outlet and I Googled it and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah,
I just said that because there isn't, as far as I can tell, a name for this stretch of water. It might just be the Fenton. I called it Hanson's Pond Outlet because this is Hanson's Pond and that's the outlet stream.
it's a dam.
So, some of these don't have names. Right.
And on the same document, I think it was figure 1, the
Mhm.
section on the bottom, you referred to figure 2. Did you really mean to refer to figure 3?
Entirely possible, yes. If I just open up this,
That
I
it says
see
figure
figure
2 on it. I think you
2.
meant figure 3.
that seems likely. Figure 4, figure 3, figure 4, figure 5.
No, it's figure 1 that refers to figure 2, and I think it means to refer to figure 3.
That's
See where
likely.
you bottom.
Yeah, no, that's
That should
wrong.
be figure
That should be
3.
figure 3.
Yeah.
So So sorry about that mistake. But I think that while it may seem like a kind of radical thing that we're locking down 50 feet on each side of every river, it's not that far from what's already been done.
I don't think it's that radical. Yeah.
It's not that radical.
I think also you all seem to assume that everybody understands 50 feet on either side. I don't think that's defined anywhere that it's 50 feet on either side.
No, it's 50 feet from, which means if I go to the edge of it with my measuring tape and I slap it into the earth and I drag it 50 feet, that's 50 feet. And I could do it to the other side too.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what I mean is when you hear the 50 feet, we got to make sure they understand it's 50 feet from both sides.
Now, is it from the floodplain or from the?
I don't know how that's.
So that would be the devil in the details. We really need to understand how we're gonna be putting our measuring tape down.
Yep.
Because
How to
Fenton has
define-
1,000 feet at one point. And
Mhm.
then it might
So-
be 50 on top of that.
Well, I don't think we're gonna do it. Are we doing it 50 feet from the purple line, from the flood zone? Flood zone?
I think it's 50 feet from the water.
That's
from the water's
what I'm
edge.
saying.
The
So
problem,
that might already be
In the
part of the
spring.
flood zone.
Exactly.
but there are other places where the flood zone's only about 10 feet wide, once you get
Exactly.
far enough upstream.
But it shouldn't be any less than the floodplain. Well, it's already covered by the flood.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
So I'm thinking it's 50 feet from the center of the river, however we need to understand how Vermont.
Center of the river. or
I would
edge of
do
the
edge
river?
of the river, even accepting that river shift, right? Because
Right.
zoning gets revised and we redo our maps.
So edge of the river, but edge of the river is very hard to define.
Yep. Which is why, I mean, if there's any question and I go out and I say that's the edge and they say no, it's not, I'll say, fine, hire a soil scientist, hire a wetland scientist and delineate that river for
So
me.
that's something we'll have to work out in the details. But
I'm
the ed-
going to
the
put a
edge of
star
the
next to
river,
that.
because, like last summer, the edge of the river is gonna be different
Yeah.
from last fall when we had all that rain.
But the
you
center
can
of the
sort of-
river might not be far enough though. From the center,
You can
50 feet.
tell-
Right, because the river could be 50 feet wide.
Yeah.
You can
Right.
tell how the water course, generally, there's a definition of
Yeah.
the edge of the, like scouring and so we might be able to do that, but all to say, we need to make sure that's clear.
I will look into that and how they define it, what the, stream bank and all these various
There's
terms.
flow full or bank full.
Bankful flow,
bank
yeah.
full flow. There's
That's a
those
term Derek
terms.
used once.
Yeah.
But yes, in my presence at least.
Does Eastern Highlands ever inspect a septic system?
Yes, but I mean, you mean, no, once it's
Once
No,
it's
they don't.
installed, it could go for hundreds of years.
And it could be,
Ever,
they don't, it's just basically if it's failing, and generally when a property transfers is when.
Or as part of every zoning permit, even for a shed or over 200 square foot garage addition, accessory dwelling unit.
you check to see if it's working.
So the applicant has to do a public health review with Eastern Highlands. Now, in order for me to issue the zoning permit, I need Eastern Highlands to have looked at this in terms of the septic and, I don't know. Always.
No, always, yeah.
Yeah, so they're looking at things like, are they putting a garage on their leach field? Are
I don't know, they're
they?
looking at if it's function, like they're not
Right.
going out there doing a perk test.
Sometimes.
If it's adding a bedroom.
Yes, but yes, the health
Yeah.
department is involved in almost every zoning permit that gets issued.
Yeah,
Okay, because if we're really serious about water quality,
Yeah.
we need to test septic systems.
In my experience, health districts don't have a ton of people for a very large area. And it would be very difficult to randomly test, regardless of legality. But they will respond to complaints if someone says, I'm pretty sure that septic system is failing. I've seen them go out in the past and respond to those, but unless there's good evidence.
Yeah.
You
We
mean
probably can't do anything.
Shoreline communities require different communities require different things, but one that I am familiar with, you are required to pump every 2 years.
That's town
It's a
ordinance, I
it's a
think.
shoreline thing.
And I think we have that in our POCD as one of the goals to look at it, evaluating such an ordinance, but then
Who's gonna enforce
monitor that?
Monitor it, yeah.
we'd have to get the health.
We got
department
thousands.
excited about that.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
You don't want to pump sewers?
No, no, thank you. I don't want to be in charge of that.
So
So where do we go here? What's the temperature of the room, A, and then B, there is a little bit more work that has to be done. And so can we just talk a little bit about next steps here?
May I ask what the Conservation Commission wanted us to do?
They have been very frustrated that we haven't done anything yet. And so they asked staff to start rolling up our sleeves and evaluating this again. And so that's what we've asked, that's what Michael's, one of his first charge as a town of Mansfield employee is just to kind of pull together the data. So now we have to decide, do we feel these riparian corridors are sufficiently protected with our flood hazard zones and our performance standards and our wetland regs? If not, then what do we do in terms of zoning?
Yeah, I think the ones that have no flood zone delineated, we should protect them as best we can.
yeah,
So,
I mean,
I wanted this committee to kind of look at this before, well, I think
Right.
it has to be in conjunction with the Conservation Commission, because
Right.
I think you have a better understanding of how the regulatory process works. And I also Michael did a great job kind of synthesizing all of the information.
And I think 50 feet will make everyone unhappy, which means we're doing the right thing.
government, yay.
Some people say it's too much, some people say it's too little, so that's when we know we're doing the right
Can you
thing.
go back to the one that shows the different feet and what it affects? Table you had.
Yes. So this is now, again, this is 1995 data. I pulled this table directly out of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments report from 2021.
And there was another table that mentioned the nitrogen and
Phosphorus.
the phosphorus that was being affected.
So we have this, which is nitrogen phosphorus percent down, and then we have this. So the width of the buffer, and of course, I don't actually know what buffer width means here because I didn't pull out the paper where this came from. But if buffer width is the total width of the buffer, are we making a 100-foot buffer or a 50-foot buffer here, right? So I don't have the term definition for
Yeah,
this.
I was concerned that was misinterpreted.
I don't have the term buffer for this. But 50 to 100 is the place where you start to see control of these things. Less than 50, I don't think it'll do anything. Again, I haven't studied this extensively, but from what I've read so far, 50 is kind of the minimum that most people have
Let me go back
accepted.
to the chart. So at
At 30 feet
at
wide.
30 feet, you start to get some,
Reduction in
yeah.
nitrogen.
Is it
This is
double
probably
line?
stochastic variability here of the percent phosphorus reduction. It really jumps up when you go out more. There's always going to be some disagreement from the scientists, but it's pretty clear that you get a huge increase between going from a buffer of 30 feet to a buffer of 60 feet.
We had a map that showed if we went 50 feet, how that encroached.
That map. All those properties in light blue will have some effect and will come and will be angry.
But they can build on a different part of the property.
But they already may have that
Right.
effect based on our
And
performance
they already
standards.
have a non-conforming house.
How
on it.
how hard it is it to make a map like that? I mean, can you make a map at 50 feet and make another map at 60 feet to see what the effect is if there's a a major difference?
I can do that. I take you up on that offer to get a full version of ARC on the computer.
Linda has, I'm
Um,
sure Linda
This is
has.
50 and 100 here.
Oh,
It
there's
has
more
both
than one
50
there?
And 100, yeah.
So-
Oh, okay.
What,
The dark blue,
dark
which
blue
you
is
see almost
100.
none of,
What's dark blue?
there's
That
only a
must be dark
few.
blue, Okay,
Here,
so
here,
that's only 100, that's 100, that's all we have.
Well, no,
So-
so that's if we
so
went with
blue
100.
is
impacted
Blue
by
would be
100.
50 only, and dark blue would be, all the way up to 100.
so really not that much difference
Not much
between the
difference in
two.
50 and 100.
No.
no.
So I
Which-
wonder if there's a spot in between where we eliminate all the dark blue, but we still get as much as we can get.
60 at least.
I wonder.
75.
But I'd like to, yeah, I'd go for 65, but that's.
We'll wind up with 82 and a half feet.
You know, it's kind of a scientifically developed amount based on the effect it would have. I mean.
Are these-
it'd be good.
You don't
Some of
know,
these,
These are
some of these,
parcels.
some of these properties are right down the middle of them. That's great.
And a lot of the ones that would be affected
Restore.
are already developed.
right, that's what I
Yeah.
was curious theoretically, how many of these are already
A
developed?
lot of
What's-
grandfathering here.
Yeah,
Look at these all the way through the middle of
Interesting to know
that, through
how
this
many
house.
parcels we would be affecting. I mean,
yeah, that's a,
is it 10? Is it 50? Is it?
right, that's,
It would be, it's certainly more than 10.
yeah.
But it's interesting, like how many vacant parcels?
That's-
Is
Right,
that what you're
that's what I
asking?
would
The
want to know,
only
because
thing
otherwise
I
we don't
think
have any
that-
control over it
They're
anyway.
only vacant, yeah. And, you
There's
know,
probably not that many of them that are vacant.
Is there a way of knowing what's vacant?
The grandfather.
Yes.
Yeah, you put buildings.
we'd have to.
But like
manually
at the
do
same
it.
time as I pull that out, I can probably get a printout from the assessors of just print me these properties and what it says on the use of the land, because that's all in Vision.
Right,
And I know
'cause
you can do it from the back
Because
end.
that's actually the relevant information,
Right.
isn't it?
Well, kind of,
Or, I
but
mean, one piece of it,
Except that we are limiting
what people
further,
can do going
further
forward.
development.
you can't, you
going
won't be able to bump
forward.
out your house as much. You won't be
Right.
able to put up a new garage.
Or a
Um,
subdivision. You'd have to figure that out. You'd have to take that into
Yeah, if
consideration.
we have any land big enough.
Pretty much all of this is in pursuit of, and the why are we doing this comes down to Mansfield is not so far gone. Trying to put these kinds of protections in place in the middle of Hartford, right, where you've got 75 to 80% of your riverbank is developed and the rest is already semi-urban. We're right on the cusp of being at the 11% or under of affected water line that preserves that critical water quality.
The state selecting this part,
Yep.
is that because of that, that it's still pretty clean?
I think so. I do not know. I have not been able to dig up their internal reports on what produced this map.
Okay.
What I presume is that if we look at the areas where we have the least,
Right,
this is one of them, but it is also right upstream from Willimantic. And further down, we have several of our urban centers in Norwich.
What is
and
the
things.
implication that we should not develop?
I think the implication is that we should attempt to minimize development within 300 feet of our water courses. Not develop, but do so in a way that's going to leave as much of a buffer as we can.
Right.
You know, it's
Tragedy
funny,
to commons.
it's funny, I was a kid and I used to like to clam. And you could clam all through you could not clam at the bottom of Connecticut because it was all red lined because the water was too dirty. I had to always go over to Rhode Island.
Right.
I went as a young adult to Miami, used the glass bottom boat, loved the reefs out there. They were so beautiful. Now coming back, I went to the glass bottom boat, Miami coming back, the reefs are all dead. The sugar plantations, the phosphorus from the sugar plantations killed all the reefs. Coming back to Connecticut, though, I can clam again in Connecticut. So something happened positively while I was gone.
Gotten better.
Since the 1970s, the Connecticut River was noted as a Class D water course in terms of its safety for human health and habitation. It's up to a Class B, which means that it's significantly improved, but we still have major phosphorus problems.
And some of that's Vermont and New Hampshire.
Yeah, we can yell at the people upstream too. It's their problem, it's their fault. But they do have stronger protections than we do. So, some of that. Anyway, I know we're a bit over time. I didn't want to take everybody's time. But
No,
this is what I've got so far. And I've got questions to go away and look into. I will look into, are we going to get sued for non-compliance? I will look into starting to make that map of exactly how far can we push it with properties being protected, affected rather, how many vacant lots will affect, things like that. I will try to produce something on those details.
And this is gonna be, I think this process is gonna, so maybe can I segue into the regulation reorganization? Because I think, so as you all know, we're reorganizing our regulations. You have received chapters 1 through 4. Bill Tomeko has been great and given us lots of good feedback that we have passed along to Tyche. And you will be getting the remaining chapters. We will be receiving them on Thursday. So there's a couple of things. Does this committee want to look at them before the full commission looks at them? And then you do, you basically receive them and schedule a public hearing for adoption. I'm seeing, I think I saw.
Our resident.
Depends
analyst.
on, it depends on how much you chew them out.
Well, and I want to take one step back here. They are, so you guys have been working on this for many years, as I said, like many years. So we decided that we were going to embrace imperfection and try to get something done, because we haven't had anything, we have not been able to get
Perfect is
anything
the
done.
enemy of the good.
And so when I came on board, I said, I gotta be okay with a little imperfection here. So what we've decided to do is take an imperfect set of regulations and reorganize them and put them into a more user-friendly context. So, but we're gonna embrace the fact that they're gonna be imperfect for a little bit. And they always will be imperfect, but they're gonna get closer to, they're gonna get better.
And they
So
really are an evolving thing anyway. So they're never
regulations
really-
always are an evolving thing. That said, Bill, I'm happy to, if you, no, I'm serious about and genuine. I really like when people find typos and give me
Well, at
constructive
least our
criticism.
cover letter should be free of typos.
So we're going to continue to provide them with things like for typos, but you had some concerns about some of the things that were changed, and those I think we worked out that were as a result of legal best practices and bringing them in conformance with current state law, right?
Let me just tell everybody what I thought. It was good if they would identify when they're making changes because of that, so that we know what changes are being made. Rather
Yeah.
than just give us a document in which they change different stuff and we have to read it and try to figure out what was changed.
Yeah.
And so I made a cross-reference
Yep.
showing this is the stuff that was changed and this in order to figure out
So
why did they change it.
Yeah.
And so I asked if they, as a deliverable, they can identify what they're changing for us.
We talked
So that
Yeah,
we can
that
go
was-
right to that point.
Yeah, so my understanding was that was always part of the deliverable,
Yeah.
was to provide a sort of a chart saying this section was changed because we can't give a waiver, right?
Well, so-
And
Into this
Jennifer,
case
I
law.
wholeheartedly
Yeah.
agree with you. Perfection is the enemy of
Yeah.
getting.
And I did, so the full commission and this, I believe this committee, and then it definitely went to the full commission. You have a whole table that we will include when we receive these for public hearing, a whole table of where they needed to fix the best, the
But it
things
should
like.
be easy for them to italicize or something when they're putting new words in and taking words out. It should be easy.
So
for them
you're
to do
you're
that.
thinking about more of doing it in like an what do you call that,
Outline?
function in Word? Yeah.
Track changes.
Track
I don't think
changes?
they can do
Sure.
track changes
Well,
because this is such a
this-
substantial reorganization.
the Word document has been created over a period of time. And they have, your department has expertly dummied Word to make it do the things that they needed it to do. And when they try to take it and put it into their system, all these dummying changes, and I guess I shouldn't use that word, but
Well, yeah, I know what you mean.
There were
I'm a one
workarounds.
friend.
There were
Work-
definitely
workaround
workarounds.
friends.
Yeah,
all of these workarounds that they've done really screw up
yeah.
the formatting. It was just very hard to try to figure out what did they do and why did they do it? What did they mean? And when they changed from figure 4.5, did they really mean to go to 6.7? And you know, it was very hard to follow it through. And sometimes they didn't mean to go to 5.7 or whatever. They made mistakes on their transfers.
Right. So there, and we did talk with them about that. And so where was I?
Your question, I think, was does it get sent straight to the full commission or?
Yeah,
Do we want to
and I'm
review it
hearing,
first?
I'm hearing that you want to, well, at least one of you want to review.
Give
it.
me a shot
It
at
will
it.
be overwhelming to people that haven't even thought about it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, so we're gonna look at this and we'll probably schedule a special meeting for you guys we'll get that out to you. Is when we'll look at this as a staff and then we'll get that out to you probably early next week. And then we will bring it to the full commission, and then I'd like to schedule a public hearing sooner rather than later so that I can get this, we can get the reorganized document and then put it into the general code and then start really digging into things like the riparian riparian corridor zoning. I think the rooster thing, we probably can fix as a separate reg change. We're gonna have to have a separate public hearing. I wouldn't want to lump that in with this new, but I think we probably can fix roosters sooner rather than later.
Okay.
I'm looking at
So
Jillian.
we've been very upfront in all our communications that we are just reorganizing these regs. And I don't, at this time, I don't think that we should be changing even something as small as the roosters, because we're just reorganizing.
Just look dishonest.
We have made changes to the regulations, like you did the 10 to 15, you did the DMR, so we
That
could
was
do,
separate,
we could
yeah.
do a separate public hearing.
Yes, it would
Just
be
to, it
separate.
would be separate.
Separated from.
We're not lobbing any significant
But-
changes into this reorg.
Yeah.
You notice that they screwed that up too.
What's
The
that?
10 to 15 wasn't right in their document.
Well, I think that might have been done before we
Yeah, that changed.
made the 15% change, because that was,
No,
They-
they did half and half. They changed the
Oh.
word 15, but they left
Oh.
the number 10.
okay.
They got halfway there.
Yeah, they got it halfway.
12.5, we'll call it here.
So Jillian, any of these changes will not affect the complaints that you have
Any of the changes?
in the rooster business.
No,
What's
it's
your-
been,
Eventually.
so I guess we have to decide if we're going to if I'm going to come to you guys before we make these changes for an interpretation of the lot area. Right, because I have an active complaint right now, and it's an interpretation issue about a percentage of the amount of birds. Oh, they birds.
Yeah,
Birds.
they're birds.
Okay. Birds. Wait. Of the percentage of the amount of birds allowed on the square foot lot. So if I cannot get resolution on this active complaint, then I will need to come to you for that interpretation at a regular meeting.
And do they have roosters for breeding purposes? Is that why they have it?
You know what? That's not a question I ask.
Generally, they're like, oops, they told us that we were getting a hen and
Oh,
oops,
man.
we got a rooster, that's my neighbor.
They just don't know. what
And then
to
they
do with
end
it.
up
Say,
bad. Yeah.
"What are you gonna do?
you can't
You're
take it
12
for a
with
ride.
rooster."
Yeah.
Send it to a farm upstate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Send it to Ashford.
That is upstate.
Well, they will have to figure out how to deal with that themselves, though.
Well, the interpretation thing, will impact that specific enforcement case, depending on how the commission decides to interpret
Yep.
that. And so that may be something you want to
Yeah,
bring sooner
so
or later.
we'll see how.
Because the
how
current
this
things
goes.
give no provisions for under 40,000 feet, correct?
It's,
It's an
that's,
interpretation.
that's.
That's exactly
Hence
it.
the need for an interpretation. Yeah.
But it doesn't specify.
No, but normally it's when the officer makes the determination.
Exactly.
And if someone fights back, we can go to you, or they can appeal to ZBA.
Yeah.
Um,
The other choice.
ZBA appeals are terrible.
And when you go to the tractor store and you see all those cute little chicks, you can't tell if it's a rooster or a chicken when it's in the pen.
Well,
Those little tiny
when they
ones.
sell it to you, they'll sell it to you as hens. But there'll be some mistakes in there.
Isn't
They
a
say
12-foot, a 12-week chicken a pretty grown chicken, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's easy to tell at 12 weeks.
but they're like, they're a chicken at that point. We're not a little chick anymore.
All right.
All right, so,
We talk
Anything
about
else we need to do
one
today?
more thing.
Yeah.
We got a lot of interesting things today.
yeah,
Oh,
We're gonna talk about outdoor dining again.
Oh, that was my right during COVID, right?
That
It's
was,
still by right.
it is.
Still by right.
and it will become by right.
It'll become by
And
right.
we don't have a choice.
Okay, so,
How is it will become a
State statute.
state statute?
They're gonna change.
okay, so we don't have to do anything, right?
Well,
it.
the last sentence of the statute, well, it's very long, but it reads, let's see. I'm trying to find the beginning of it. Basically, until 9 PM or a time established by the zoning commission of the municipality, whichever is later, may engage in outdoor food and beverage service until 9 PM or a time established by the zoning commission of the municipality, whichever is later.
So just to back it up, because Jillian and Linda were involved with this, but basically you can serve outdoor, you provide outdoor food and beverage service as an accessory use. If you are, accessory to an existing food or beverage outlet. So that means like on a sidewalk or in a tent, but you still have to have a zoning permit. And so you still have to meet, the fire code, appropriate setbacks,
Building code.
building code, safety
Safety.
things. So now they're saying that as of April 30th, this is going to be law. But there's this time thing
So we have
that
to decide on a time.
We don't have to do anything if
Just
we
say 9
think
o'clock.
9 PM is appropriate. We take no action. If we think,
5 AM is appropriate.
well, if we think 10 PM, if we don't have to do anything, if we think it's 8 PM because it becomes 9 PM. But if we think it's 10 PM, then we would have to, I think, insert that into our regulation.
I have a question.
Why would we be upset about this? Why would we not want outdoor dining?
No,
We can't decide that. We're
we
just
don't-
deciding the time.
Yeah,
They
so
have to put-
how
so
late?
we
How late?
Because of
support outdoor.
properties that are close by and listening
Correct.
to it, is
Yeah.
that the idea? Okay.
So for example, the poorhouse on Route 32, that's a non-conforming, they have a special permit. So I think if now we have to allow it till 9 PM. But I think for them, if they want to change that, they have to come in for a modification to their special permit.
Okay, so what do you feel about the times?
Well, 5 AM is wrong.
Okay,
That's too late.
Oh,
Um,
come on.
I think 10.
Make the college kids go to bed by 5 AM.
What do you think about 10?
Because we're university, we might want to go later.
But
or something.
everywhere?
Does this mean that they don't need to come before us for a permit anymore for outside?
They still need to.
They have to get a zoning permit.
Okay, they still do.
A zoning from Jillian.
Okay.
You could do it by zone, couldn't you?
The time?
Couldn't you do it by time in the zone?
Yeah.
The dense zones around the university, you
You're
could
having,
push
if anyone
later.
is having, if it's requiring a special permit, I think they need to come back and get a modification.
It's a change to the terms of your special permit. I
Yeah,
think that's.
because
fair.
I don't want the poorhouse is, it's all residential. It's on 32, but it's all residential. And say, Spring Hill Inn,
Right.
right?
Well, I believe they have outdoor dining.
But
already.
it's-
They
but-
do, right?
but-
On the patio, yeah.
How late though?
I don't know. And I guess the other question becomes, you may engage in outdoor food and beverage service. So does that mean your food is served at 9 p.m.? Right? But it doesn't, you don't really exit until 10 or 10:30, right? I think
Right.
that could think think about it like that.
I'm wondering if we want to just let this slide
Yeah,
until
Okay,
someone asks us.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave
Good
it
idea.
9 until somebody
Leave it
asks
9.
for.
leave it 9.
How many places are like this that we know of? You mentioned 2 of them.
Jennifer and I were just talking about this when this came up, and we have quite a few. We have Coyote Flaco has outdoor dining. We
Yeah.
have Fenton. We have Huskies and Huskies Tavern and Ted's. and
Margaritaville.
Margaritaville. It's more than I thought.
Get around
But
here.
it's more than I.
That's
thought.
7. You've got your reading for the next
Yeah.
week.
The places
I'm gonna
you
take around
mentioned
here.
Are situated pretty well for that kind of thing.
But we have the Spring Hill Inn. We have Sticks and
Margaritas is
Stones.
not, though. Look at those condos there.
Where?
The Margaritas.
Oh,
up,
yes, they're kind of
Kindness.
used to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people complained when we did the
Yeah.
patio
Yeah,
approval.
Yeah, that was a big deal when you. So anyways, that's, so.
We're
The
gonna let it
bottom
lie.
line is that we'll let
Let it lie.
it lie until.
We got more important things to do.
Okay.
Then finally, is just a little bit of a staff update from me and anyone else of the staff, but I just wanted to let you know that in terms of the MCT zone, so the neighbors have met with Chuck and his team. They are, the next steps is that the neighbors are coming up with sort of what they're willing, some ideas for Chuck. Ted Buskey did submit something to the commission at your March 14th meeting. And, when you do discuss this, he would like the commission to kind of review this. But I think basically we're waiting for Chuck and the neighbors to talk. But as you all well know, these regulations, you're the ones who are going to enact these regulations. So if you have ideas or thoughts, and I think you need to decide, are you going to go forward and are you just going to go and live with this denial? Are you going to go forward and change this reg? Are you, because there are, other properties where this reg can be applied, so.
And I need to familiarize myself with those other properties. I don't exactly know where they are.
Okay.
Over there.
We can pull that map.
It's in the POCD, right?
It's in the POCD and it's also in their,
I mean,
Their
just
map
to
amendment.
see what.
their regulation amendment.
I mean, it's gonna be, just to see what you think a universal MCT regulation would look like.
Right,
I mean, we can't, as we said, we can't spot.
No, we gotta make a
So
decision for all of them.
it's hard to compare apples to oranges in that case.
The neighbors have noted many times that the difficulty of a transition zone is this transition between what to what, 2 distinct characters that have a tendency to change dynamically. The transition from what the standard was, the properties that were the standard were, to what it's going to be now is a much higher density transition. So there will probably need to be some degree of flexibility in that zone.
So one of the things that keeps coming up is water for that area.
Yeah.
And I know when Yukon sent their lawyers to our meeting all the time, they always raise that issue that there would not be enough water for all the development.
no sewer, not enough
Oh,
sewer.
I thought it was.
Plenty of water. it's
Plenty
the
of water.
sewer.
It's the sewer.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's the sewer.
And
Yeah.
tell us-
We have 400,000 gallons per day.
So
So
how real is that?
So here, so back in the day, back before June 30th, 2022, we had a different sewer service agreement with the town and the
Okay.
university. So as of June 30th, 2022, that was renegotiated. So it used to be that there was a Yukon sewer service agreement and then a town
Okay.
sewer service agreement. In June 30th, that was renegotiated. So if it's within, if it can connect to sewer, if it's in that sewer service district and there's capacity, they can connect. There's a number of other things. They have to do some hydrologic investigations. They have to make sure the pipes are, can handle it, I guess.
So are there limitations on that?
There's, once we get to the 400,000 gallons, we're gonna have to renegotiate and perhaps pay for improvements to the Yukon's sewer system. That's
So
the plan.
up till then, it was at the discretion of the university, and
There were
then
two-
after that,
There were two sections. There was areas that were in the town sewer service district, and then there was the Yukon sewer service district. So for example, King Hill Road was in the university's sewer service district. So, and the and Pond Place on Hunting Lodge Road, Hillel. So the university put moratoriums on development on at least 4 properties. The stores, 1244 Stores Road where Starbucks is, that's in the Yukon. They
Okay.
said, nope, you can't connect. They said to Pond Place, nope, you can't connect. King Hill Road, nope. Hillel, nope. And there might be one other. As of June 30th, however,
It's all one.
it's all one. So
Is
once
that-
we start getting to that, like 15% of that 400,000 gallon number, then we start to have conversations with Yukon.
did
Now,
they
there
ever
is
give
a-
us our
there is-
motivation?
Excuse me?
Did they ever give us their motivation, the university, why they were refusing?
They didn't want they didn't want any residential development that would compete with their,
That was their motivation.
that was basically it.
What percent did you say we need to renegotiate?
Well, if once we're within 15% is my
Oh, within
understanding,
15%
of
of the
400, then we're like, okay, we gotta get to the table and figure out what we're doing
Now, the
here.
other thing to remember is that that is not a total forever.
Correct.
I've been to the
We've got-
sewer plant. I've done a tour of the sewer plant, and they can make another million.
So that's
Easily.
not, so it's really not limiting.
Someone has to come up
Mm.
with the capital to do the expansion in the
Okay.
future.
Yeah.
That
It
will
is
be a
limiting.
topic.
Okay.
It is limiting right now, and
Right.
until we would have to pony up money to help them with those.
Probably what
improvements.
happens in the future, might be the distant future, is that we may have to pay for the expansion of the
Sewer
sewer
line.
system.
So how much is kind of within the current parameters? How much development does that allow for in that area?
So,
Are we anywhere near it?
yes, we are. I mean, so.
If you factor in all that stuff.
If you factor, so when a development comes in, like everything that is part of their special permit application, they have to get a letter from Derek that says, today, there is enough capacity
For this project,
for this particular project. Doesn't mean you're gonna get it.
right?
You don't get it until you pull your zoning permit. So the only one that is obligated is the standard right now.
Right,
Because they have their zoning permit, so they're gonna get, they're committed. So right now, if Derek keeps a spreadsheet and we're, if everything gets developed, we're right up there.
and that, part of my question was really thinking kind of as a commission about what we want there. If there are some limits on sewer, that's gonna limit what's being built. Do we want to say we have enough of this sort of development and now we
See,
want
that's,
this?
there's the rub. You can't,
It's first come, first serve, and we can't do that.
Okay.
I can just imagine the
Yeah,
lawsuit
yeah.
if you had multiple zoning permits on your desk at the same
So
time.
if you could say, you could put another
We don't want
moratorium
my record
on
at the bottom.
multifamily development in town.
If you're bumping up against whatever. Yeah.
So
So
it'd be
if the first
multifamily.
people who come before you are these people doing these big apartments, then
They
we
get it.
cannot, right, we cannot prioritize something else.
Right, we're not the
But I think
university
at
that
some
we can
point-
pick and choose.
At some point, you need to talk about expanding sewer plant itself.
It sounds like that is kind of close to a time? It's
No,
almost-
because we only, we've got so many developments in the pipeline, but you don't know if they're gonna come through.
So even the ones that we've done approvals for with.
Wetlands, nope, they're not,
So they won't know,
The only one that has a zoning permit
is the standard.
is the standard. Even Eagleville Green does not have a zoning
Okay.
permit yet. They will soon, and they
So
will.
after the standard, how many gallons are left?
I'd have to, Derek would have to tell me.
Okay.
I mean, there's quite a bit after the standard.
Does that account for, are we already accounting for Yukon's own projects?
We
Because
don't
they're,
account
because
for
we
them.
don't
That we don't
know.
account- we don't
That's
count.
not
Okay.
part of
That's
That's not part of our calculation.
We only get, we get 400,000 gallons for town projects.
When the
Town
university,
projects,
when the
okay.
university runs up against the limit, they'll just expand the plant.
Right, that's true.
Right.
That's not a constraint to
But
them.
they don't have money limitations.
So
University
water
doesn't have
is
money
another
limitations.
thing.
Just-
Water
They
is
do
another
raise it.
thing. Where they, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm getting an opinion from the town attorney, but my understanding is that. If you go on to GIS, you'll see a you can put on the zones and you can,
Yeah, I can just do that. Nope, that's. Answer.
it's in zoning.
Can anybody go in and do this? Play around with
Yeah,
it?
yeah, you just search Access GIS.
It's not on.
It's great.
Yeah.
And we turn on a water pipeline overlay district and you see all of these popped up. I can actually turn off zoning and go to the gray map just to make it pop a little more. So that's our water pipeline area.
Okay.
So that's where you have access to. That's where you can connect, okay? So then we have the Connecticut Water Advisory Committee. So anyone who is connecting to the water pipeline in Mansfield has to go before the Connecticut Water System Advisory Board. And the Conservation Commission has a member, I'm a member, Meg Reich from the Willimantic River Alliance is a member. And basically, I go in and say, this is consistent with the 2006 Plan of Conservation Development. So there's a plan development area map in the 2006 Plan of Conservation Development. And you can only get density if you are shown on the 2006 Plan Development Area map in the POCD, in that version of the POCD. But for the mixed use center transition zone, the property next to Timber Drive, they have to show that they have sufficient water from wells.
And that's confusing.
It's confusing, but the public health code says just that, so they have to prove that they
So-
can
so
support
they-
this by wells.
Even though
but
they
the
have
pub-
access
In order
to
to not use the wells.
In order to not use the wells, and they will then connect, because the public health code says that they will have to connect to the water pipeline. So they will not be using wells, is the very short
Right.
answer to that story. And they will have to demonstrate that they have sufficient water. Now, to land that zone, they have to do just a very high level letter. For this, once they come in, they will most likely be required, I have to look at the zoning regulations, but they would need to be required to show that, in fact, they have enough yield from wells.
Which
So-
they won't use.
Why,
Pretty-
is that just an archaic? thing?
Because
What's
it's the public health, it has to do with the public health code is all I
Okay.
can, and I had to spend a while kind of figuring this out, because it's confusing to
Is
me.
there a reason for it?
Well,
You don't even want to know.
But-
the public health code, so Connecticut Water Company is
That's all I
there
need to know. It's
there
not
to
much,
sell
all right.
water. When we put in water and sewer, the reason why it's unusual that a town would have this water system advisory committee like we do. When we put in this water line, we didn't want to have this unfettered growth. And so that's why they
So
have
that's why that's still there.
that, yes, so that the public health code. If you're along a line, you gotta connect. The other stuff is a Mansfield thing.
Connecticut Water Company is taking all their water out of Sinipsic Lake, is
Yeah.
that correct? What happens when Sinipsic Lake dries up in August?
So they have a diversion permit from Schnipsett Lake. They run water companies all over the state. They are a big company and they will find water from somewhere else and they'll get it shipped here until such time that and no one has water, right? But
Now,
you
the
know,
interesting thing
But
about
Connecticut
that,
doesn't.
one thing to remember
What's
about
that?
that sewer project up there, I mean, all the places that you can use sewer, is that actually improves the water quality in our
Right, instead
period
of,
corridors,
yeah.
because we don't have those
All the septic
malfunctioning septic systems.
Oh my, and we
What's
zoomed
that a
in
map
too
of?
far. So this is all of the actual lots and
Oh.
the parcel number IDs from the assessors. This happens if you zoom in too far to try to get quality and then it gives no quality. So you just click off the lot numbers. This shows you I'm glad everyone enjoys my snappy commentary. So just to walk us through the actual parcels. So this is the standard. So these parcels have been merged. This is the standard. This is BPOS 1750. Again, these are rough. We have, when we get surveys, we see the actual lines.
So where's the pipe?
So the water overlay, so I'm gonna zoom out a little
pipe
bit.
goes along 195.
Yeah. So this is the lots that are attached to it. Now, you'll note some of these aren't actually in the zone to start off with.
Right.
I don't know what that does. I haven't been here long enough to
Again,
know.
where's the pipe?
It runs down 195.
195.
Five.
Oh, that's the only-
Here.
It doesn't go down 44 too? Because there's apartment places,
You mean, you're talking about sewer?
No, water. Are you talking about water?
Water?
yeah,
I don't know.
it's just on 195. How about the sewer?
No, it goes down.
No, there's 44.
How is the, excuse me, but how is the
Rolling
golf
Hills.
course.
course gonna get their water
If you, can
and sewer?
you go
I can
in?
zoom in, yes.
So,
This is the golf course property. I believe.
yeah,
This.
Yeah, water goes there.
Water
Must go down
goes-
44.
yeah, so,
That little line is the water.
Hold on, wait,
the line?
utilities, gas drainage, sewer hydrant, dropped in utility corridor. I don't know if we have water line locations on here,
we don't.
because we have the water line zone.
Yeah, no, it's not on there.
Okay, well, that's inconvenient. So the answer is we'll find out. Gonna put that down as another thing to look at.
I think, Michael, I think
Always
they
have.
own,
The main line from the Schnipsett goes down 195 to the water tanks.
The ones on top of the hill?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, but there must be. a
Hold on,
line-
okay.
Oh, there's a
We
line that
have
goes, there's a
water
line
lines.
that goes east on 44 to those apartments in.
the water
Rolling Hills.
pipeline overlay zone is, we have to read about that in the zoning regulations, because the water pipeline overlay zone is actually where you have to demonstrate that you can connect, but it doesn't mean that those are the only places that have access to water, is my understanding. But I haven't memorized that section of the.
like
zoning.
Jensen's trailer park, does it have access to water?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, it must. go
Yeah, they
down
tore them up to put in a substation down.
Look,
that was for
We're
sewer.
supposed to have something for water lines here. I was supposed to found it.
Anyways,
Know where they are.
I guess I'll talk with
Yeah.
Paul about what we want to do in terms of, your next steps
Okay.
for what you're gonna do for the MCT zone, like, these are your
Yep,
regulations,
yep,
so.
those are ours. We own them.
For better or
If we don't like them, we change them. Okay, I think that's enough for today. I love meeting in person. We can look at maps.
It's good.
We can
Yeah.
see people.
This is a great screen. This is a great room to meet.
Can we take, can I?
Yes, you
make-
can have those.
I can have,
I want it back.
Yeah, I'll give them back to you, but I'll
Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
So adjourn us, Paul.
We adjourn at
Is that what you were discussing?
3:49.
Yeah.
Thank
I can
Perfect.
see what
And be recorded.
direction I'm going.